We live?
We are live.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Megan Fisher. I work for the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. This is my colleague Jason Pariso from the Chicago Innovation Exchange. And we're here today to have a conversation with two colleagues from the University of Illinois about an engineering and design class that they'll be running this fall. And we're here today to talk about opportunities for Booth students to get involved in this class to collaborate with engineers on entrepreneurial projects. So I am going to now introduce Scott Carney and Brian Lilly, both faculty members and professors at the University of Illinois, and have them chat a little bit about who they are and this class and this opportunity.
Great, thank you, Megan. Yes, I'm Scott Carney, and I'm faculty in electrical and computer engineering down here at the University of Illinois. Our third colleague, Andy Singer, couldn't join us today, but Andy and Brian and I are teaching a new class together in engineering design. I'm also the course director for our regular senior design class, where students in a mad rush propose, design, build, test, demo, and report on a double E project. The class we're teaching this fall is meant to provide some runway into that class, allow a little more time and space for thinking about projects, for brainstorming, for criticism, and for starting all over again when you realize that the idea you thought was wonderful is really terrible. So, with that, I'll let Brian introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Brian Lilly. We lose the connection?
I think we're still good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I run a couple of companies, one out of Itasca, which isn't too far from you, Lilly Engineering. We do product design, and in addition to that, we do sales and marketing, so we kind of do the whole gamut from idea to concept to production. With respect to the university, I teach a couple of classes on product design, but specifically looking at startup opportunities. So the students will be interested in that. We've had several successful startups come out of my class. One up in Chicago you could look up. It's called Microlution. They make a very small milling machines that came out of a lab out of mechanical engineering. But I honed a business plan with them and took them around and got them startup money for that business. There's a couple others that we'll talk about throughout the course of the semester, but my real interest is getting the engineers with the business kids and seeing if something good can come out of it.
Great. So I also meant to mention that we have two Booth students on the call with us today. Their names are David Robbie and Chinmay Jain. And we'll have them speak with some questions toward the end of this conversation to represent their peers in the Booth community who are also interested in this opportunity. So thank you both for joining, and we'll hear from you a little later. So now, Scott, I just was hoping you could give a background of this opportunity and you know, what this class is and why we're interested in getting Booth students involved, and we can go from there.
Sure, sure. So this, a little history is probably in order. Last spring, we did a little bit of early matchmaking between some folks from the Booth School and students in our regular senior design class. And what we found was that the regular senior design class is just so packed and so rushed. It's hard to form teams, make those partnerships, and also have time to think about what you're doing. And so we started this new class that we're teaching this fall. It's an opportunity, the class is an opportunity for us to spend a few weeks getting students up to speed on the engineering design process, which is a well-defined process to take ideas from initial problem identification up through manufacturing and distribution and sales and everything in between. And so we're teaching that process now, and what we'd like to do with Booth students is have them come join us in the next few weeks and pair up with our students in this new design class. That pairing can take many, many forms, and since this is a new class and we're kind of feeling our way through it, we're open to a lot of different ideas. One of the things that we'd like to see happen is that part of the process of partnering with our students is defining everyone's role, and that can be different for every group. There's a reasonably good model that we've established in the regular senior design class for external mentors, as we refer to them. And those mentors come to us with problem ideas and propose them to the students, and the students sort of pick which ones they want to work on or propose their own that have nothing to do with what's been proposed. And we have a framework for mentors to define their role, and it is very accommodating of different levels of time commitment, different levels of resource commitment, and different levels of intellectual commitment. And so at one end of the spectrum, in the regular class, our mentors will come in and launch a problem and walk away and just check back with us at the end of the semester. And they don't have any resources to provide beyond that. And that's fine. We encourage that as long as the problem is interesting and the problem gets vetted by me or by Brian or by Andy or somebody. The other end of the spectrum is we have mentors who come in, propose a problem, the students pick it up, they launch, and the mentors meet with those students, every week in person to work on designs and calculations and plans, and they provide financial and material resources, and they effectively function as a member of the team. And we can accommodate everything in between, and all we really need to do is make sure that those roles are defined at the beginning so that the students are meeting the academic expectations in the class. And once the mentor's role is defined, we make sure the students meet those academic expectations. Within the new class, I'd also like there to be space for booth students to come in some new roles. So the booth students could act as a mentor, as I've just described, with that full spectrum of possibilities. They could also join an existing team where the team has already formulated an idea and has launched, but could use the sorts of intellectual resources and skills that an MBA student could bring to the project in terms of market analysis, customer interface, thinking about manufacturability, and how to launch the product beyond the class into something that might be commercializable. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that booth students could come in with their own ideas and build a team and really function as a member of the team. And we'd be very excited to see that happen as well. With Booth on a quarter system and us on a semester system, in the past in the senior design class, it's been difficult for us to do that simply because of the launch times. I think this is going to work really well in the new class because we are spending our first several weeks here, as we've started in August, getting our kids into the design process, but not yet selecting projects. And so as booth students come online, our students will also be brainstorming and selecting projects and launching their own teams. It'll be a perfect time for the booth students to join and either lead or join or mentor in any of those roles. So yeah, I think that covers it. And Brian is really our guy who knows real-world applications, and he's bringing a lot of energy into the class, and I'll let Brian talk a little bit about his vision for what we're doing as well.
Yeah, so I guess I want to emphasize too this notion of the booth students. Maybe they have some industry experience. Most of our kids will be seniors, undergraduates in electrical and computer engineering. They won't have a lot of experience in industry. They might have had summer internships, that sort of thing. So we would really benefit if some of the MBA students that do have experience and coming forth with some ideas. I'll just give you a little snapshot of how I work with Lilly Engineering. most of the people are salespeople, and they kind of give the engineers the marching orders. So I'm hopeful that the Boost students, at least the ones that have some experience, maybe some networking and intimate knowledge of a space, can come forth with some of those ideas, because you know, the undergraduates just don't have a lot of experience in industry, and I think that's where a lot of the opportunities are. A lot of the opportunities are going to come from, you know, what I consider business-to-business sort of opportunities, industrial equipment, industrial sales, things where there aren't maybe 5 billion eyes on it like there are for every consumer product. Hopefully some of those kids will have some of that experience, and that would be really fun in a good situation. What we expect from our students, or what we hope, is that it will have something to do with electrical and computer engineering, which might be a little restrictive in some ways, because that's probably not how the MBAs, you know, think. They think, well, here's a problem, let's solve this, and we're interested in those because we'll probably try to find the ECE spin on that that'll work for us too. But at this point, I wouldn't so much confine it to that. And certainly we're excited about solving social problems, and it doesn't have to be the traditional "I'm doing this for the money" kind of startup, right? Several of the startups we've had that are doing well, you can look up IntelliWheels. They're in Champaign here. They're making a wheelchair that came out of my class that is very easy for people to use. We had a company called Greenlight Planet that makes solar lanterns for the third world. You know, there's a lot of areas to think about, and I certainly don't want to focus on a startup to be, you know, how much money we're going to make. It's going to be what, you know, value are we adding to society. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and since Brian's
Brian or Scott, could you talk a little bit for our students about the capabilities of the engineering students? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's varied and broad, and so we have students who have spent a lot of time taking lab classes, and they you can say, look, I need a circuit that does this, and they'll come back a day later with the thing designed, simulated, built, and tested. And we have students who have done a lot of theoretical work, and you can say to them, you know, is it possible to have an energy recovery system built into this this mechanical device so that we can have it power something else? And they can come back a couple of days later and say, you know what, actually no, because that violates the second law of thermodynamics. We need to reconsider the whole project. Some students have all of those skills, and so they all have those some strength somewhere, but they almost all also have some weakness somewhere. And I think finding one of the reasons I'm excited about this class and the amount of time we're going to have to develop teams and projects is that we want to find students that have complementary skills that can contribute to the project, each in their own strength, in their own way, and that includes the MBA students. And if I could elaborate a little bit on something Brian was just talking about. Brian was talking about commercialization and startups coming out of this. We are definitely excited about that possibility in whatever form that takes, whether it's a venture somewhere to go make a lot of money, or it's a nonprofit to go solve a social problem, or it's something that will in some way make the world a better place. We're excited about that. The next steps after the class that we're running now for most of the students will be to launch into the regular senior design program, which in the spring will be one semester of craziness, where the students can take those designs and go build something. And normally in the regular senior design class, they don't start building until about week 6. We're hoping to move that up a month. And given that the semester is 3 months long, that adds an enormous amount of development time to the cycle. So we have great expectations. I think one of the challenges with these projects that we have faced for years is dealing with the fact that we have brilliant students who do brilliant things, and the most brilliant of them are getting siphoned up by Microsoft and Google and Amazon and are off to those jobs, and they come in, they have those jobs lined up, and they come into senior design and they do something fantastic that is certainly marketable and commercializable, and then they have to choose between sleeping on mom's couch and doing their startup or going and making 6 figures at Google, and you can imagine the choices they usually make. So one of the things I'd like to see happen here is the early thinking also provides a route to taking some of the projects, maybe just a couple of the projects, out beyond the classroom and out beyond the university.
And to follow on to that, you know, the University of Chicago, the Polsky Center, the Chicago Innovation Exchange are very committed to supporting these efforts. We've built a program over the past several years called D4, which focuses on design methodology and design thinking, and we think that interdisciplinary collaboration is so important. So to the Booth students who are watching this, we want you to know that we think that this effort is very important to the future of how universities work together, to the way that startups can successfully be started and run. To reiterate what Scott said, senior design students in the past have started working on design projects in the winter, and this effort this fall will give them more time to plan and create good ideas with strong foundations. And that's what we're hoping Booth students can help them do, and then potentially stay on in the winter to actually build something and create what could be the seed to, you know, some new technology or innovation or startup, which is really exciting. Do you have anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I think importantly, the CIE is really excited about supporting all of these efforts along with Polsky, and to that end, I think there's a number of resources that will be available to collaborations that come out of this course. You know, obviously you've mentioned the senior capstone course that follows onto this, but additional to that, there's the CoZAD competition down at UIUC, there's the New Mentor Challenge here at Booth, there is an I-Core program that we're now standing up at the CIE along with Polsky. You kind of a number of other items, including potentially being incubated at the CIE. I am the director of the Innovation Fund, so that is another funding opportunity here on campus that will grow and begin to focus on students over time. So there'll be more than a few ways that we hope to engage with teams that come out of this course.
Great.
Great. Scott and Brian, is there anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of, you know, can you talk about the time commitment that you would see for Booth students if they were to join a team, if they were kind of to engage on that level, because that's the level that we're encouraging from our side?
Sure. So, yeah, I think it will depend on the project and the students and their role. It's something that we'd like to see the teams define for us in a way that I certainly do not want to see students from either side come in and say, I can commit this much effort and then it doesn't materialize. A reasonable expectation in the spring for our students in the senior capstone course when they're into the building phase is that we expect them to spend about 15 hours a week in the lab working on their project. And this is while, of course, they're taking a full class load of other things, and so that's a really sizable commitment on the part of our students. For the Booth students, I think we need to define per project what their tasks will be and figure out reasonably what can they accommodate in their own schedules. And so whatever their commitment is, we want to make sure that on both sides there's follow-through on that commitment. I would say, you know, if you plan on participating in a team as a full-fledged member, you know, you probably need to book 5 to 10 hours a week, most likely. But that's a guideline. And as I said, we'd be very happy to have a number of different roles for Booth students within the groups. But if you're an active member working on, say, market research and customer interaction and client requirements, then that's probably, you know, in the double-digit hours per week range.
So for Booth students wondering about some of the requirements that we've marketed already, you know, I think we've said something like, you know, a minimum of 5 hours per week, is expected, that 2 visits to UIUC are expected. These things will be supported by the Polsky Center and the CIE, so we'll help, organize a trip to, one of their classes down south, or we'll, make sure we get a caravan going to get you to campus. So these aren't things that you'll be left to wonder about or figure out on your own. That's something that we'll work on along the way with you, realizing that this is an effort that kind of goes across the state to 2 different cities. But I imagine that in working with a team, you'll be having Google Hangouts like this, and working around some of that distance in order to work and stay in touch with the team if this is something you're committed to.
Yeah, and I think we'll actively look for ways to continue to invite the teams from UIUC up to the Chicago campus over time as well. So whether that takes the form of some event after the class is over, just to welcome those teams that have worked so hard, and kind of congratulate everyone, have some sort of exit and lessons learned session, whatever that might be, whatever makes sense. We hope to strengthen the bond over time.
Yeah, and we're working on the same at this end to get our kids up there to hang out with you guys.
Yeah, I think the challenge will be not so much a number of hours as a lot of the projects I've done, they're really engineering front-loaded. There's a lot of time spent designing something or building something or prototyping, and the marketing people are sort of somewhat hands tied because they're waiting for a prototype to show somebody to get market, which is one of the reasons you build a prototype is to get, feedback from a customer. So I think they'll be challenged to think about what can they do early on that will be valuable, what can they do throughout the sort of phases of the projects where they can feel like, they're active and they're helping out, because no one likes that situation, and that might be a challenge to figure out what can you be doing while the engineers are busy trying to figure out how to build this thing, so to speak. So, I'll challenge them to think about how they can do that, because it is a little bit of a chicken and an egg kind of problem. And of course, once there is a prototype, then it's very loaded on the the marketing people to do a lot of work, and the engineers are kind of waiting for feedback. So some of it isn't so much an hourly thing as it is when can I be productive, and so they all have to think about how that works.
And one of the things we can do, since this is a new course, we are kind of building it as we go, and so our course website is still in progress, and it's right now essentially just a clone of the main senior design website that we're boiling down into our kind of intro class. But it may be useful to have a look at the main senior design website now, which you can find very easily by using the Google machine and entering ECE UIUC 445, and you'll find the class website. And there you can see what our calendar looks like and where the deliverables are. And so from the standpoint that the students are driven by class schedule, you can see how things sort of have to march along. Within the new class, the one we're doing now, we will, in a couple of weeks, start that brainstorming process, and very soon after, bring in the booth students to help with that, to add ideas, to join ideas. And then, as Brian says, at that point, people need to figure out not only when they can contribute, but how they can guide the project so that they can contribute early and often. And so it'll be very helpful to have, say, a booth student telling the engineering team, you know what, guys, I know this is our long-term plan, but in the short term, it would be great if you could give me, a solid mock-up or a software simulation, or just let's get the UI up and running first so that I can start getting feedback on it. That kind of guidance from the booth students will be welcome and will be necessary so that everyone can push in the same direction.
Scott, thank you. You make a great point. I think what we're hoping to work with the booth students on here directly at the CIE and Polsky is the rapid prototyping methodologies, low fidelity prototypes, whether paper-based for physical products or PowerPoint-based to mock up a UI. something that those students can use, and maybe through Skype interviews with UIC students on board, begin to gather those kind of key customer insights that will help direct the actual physical prototyping. And just as a quick addendum for the booth students that will be watching this, after this is over, we'll be sending out an email to everyone that signed up that includes a brief description of those roles that we've mentioned, along with a link to the engineering course for both. Site for both the capstone course and this course, so you can find both those materials that Scott mentioned. And additionally, it links directly to a listing of past projects to give you an idea of what's been done before, to give you an idea of kind of what the possibilities look like. But frankly, I don't let those limit what you decide you want to put forth as an idea. But it should hopefully set the stage for they can accomplish a tremendous amount in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and it actually gives a much better answer than I gave to the question of what are the abilities of our students, because it's very hard just to capture that in a soundbite, but you start looking at what they've done in the past, and you can see, and you can see where pitfalls are too. That there are projects that have worked incredibly well, and there are projects that everyone got experience.
So let's just quickly review next steps for booth students, and then I'm going to ask David and Chinmay what questions they have. So for booth students, your next step, which was in the email that you received about this, is to fill out that Google form, which is just a short application to this process so that we understand your level of interest and your commitment. You have a chance to tell us if you have an idea that you'd like to propose to the students. But you could also join a team, as we've said, working on someone else's idea. So please don't feel limited if you don't have a project idea currently. Is there anything else you'd want to say about next steps? That's due by the afternoon on this Sunday, this coming Sunday. So please, feel free to get that to us at any point. But we're really excited to hear from you and excited to get you involved in this process. David, why don't we try and take a question from you first, if you're able to use the Hangout. Can we hear you?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. Yeah, well, this sounds really great. I think there's going to be a lot of interest from the booth students. One of the big issues that a lot of MBA students face is lack of engineering help for a lot of their ideas, so hopefully this helps solve part of that problem. So along those lines, I'm just wondering, say you have a booth student that comes in with an idea and is looking for one partner rather than a team. Is that something that could work in this class? And along those lines, how are your students looking at IP and turning this into a business after they graduate?
Sure, those are great questions. So there are really two answers to that question. There's the current class that we're involved in right now, which leads into the senior design class for most students, but not all. Right now, yes, we would be open to essentially a team of two people, a booth student and a UIUC engineering student in our class. That's definitely a possibility. In the senior design class in the spring, the UIUC side of the team is capped at 3 students. In the past, we've had projects that needed to be bigger, and we've broken the project up into semi-autonomous teams of 3. 3 just seems to be a critical number beyond which, once you hit 4 students, its probability approach is 1 that something will go wrong. So we cap teams at 3. We allow teams of 1. We mildly discourage it, but it's allowed. And so if there's a good reason for it to be 1 U of I student, fine, we can accommodate that, and we'll move ahead with that. IP is interesting. So a little background on that. At the University of Illinois, I work for the University of Illinois. When I do things that are funded through the University of Illinois by our federal funding agencies, and I invent something, I have IP, and the university owns it. That is because I'm an employee, and even though the grant, has me as a PI, the grant is to the university, and so the university owns the IP that comes through. For our students are paying customers, and they are not employees, and we have a memo describing the University of Illinois policy on student IP generated in classes, but to give a very layman's version of it, what they do in class is theirs. The university makes no claim on it. And so we've had sponsors come in who have said, look, I'm going to bring a lot of resources, I'm going to bring in a problem, and any team that works on this in order to get my resources and my problems is going to need to sign IP over to us. And we provide, through the university, a boilerplate for that process, including an NDA as necessary, that's been blessed by University of Illinois lawyers. If you're coming in as a team member and you think you want to grow this idea beyond the classroom, I strongly suggest that you make an arrangement with your partner on this end at the beginning, and it will be up to you to build that partnership.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, do you have any follow-on questions or additional questions about that?
That makes a lot of sense. I have a separate question. I'm just a little confused of the difference between the goals of the fall class versus the goals of the spring class. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, in a word, lab. So there's no laboratory time in the fall. The students are working on paper, they're working on designs, they're going through a design review process, and they're planning. In the spring, they're in the lab and they're building stuff. Now, we could accommodate some rapid prototyping in the fall as part of that design process. And we are just launching this class, and so we're open to those kinds of ideas. But the primary idea with the fall is to give people time to think about what they're doing before going in and doing it.
You know, in the past, they enter ECE senior design, and they kind of have a week, or maybe 10 days, or 2 weeks to really say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and we feel like that's not enough time. So that's why this course, Scott came up with this course idea to say, okay, let's give them several months to really think about what they want to spend their time building. And so that's where we're at on that.
Great. Thank you so much. We were having some technological issues with Chinmay earlier. Chinmay, can we hear you now? I think not. Do you have questions you'd like to type into our chat, Chinmay? And in the meantime, David, do you want to ask anything else?
So from a Boost student standpoint, if we are looking to build a business after we graduate, I'm a second year, so coming from my perspective, I probably would want to move a little faster. And so how would that work outside of the classroom?
Well, right now, I mean, we certainly at this end, there are some opportunities at the university for our students to use some of the facilities for rapid prototyping, some of the general purpose project laboratories to do some things. And if you and this is why we like the sort of match process, is that if you come in and say, look, I want to move really fast, I want to start getting stuff done this fall, and you find a partner that resonates with that and says, yeah, let's get going, there are some resources down here they can use to do that, even before we hit the spring. I would say there are also going to be resources at the CIE, and I'll let Jason and Megan talk about that. But from the class perspective, that's not going to bear on their academic performance at the university. Personally, I'll be very excited to do what I can to support that and to provide resources for that.
And just a quick follow-up to that, coming in from the outside, would there be a way to, for lack of a better word, vet the potential people we'd be working with for interest? So, like you said, a lot of these students are going to go take jobs at Amazon and Google and whatnot, and if you get some Boost students that really want to do this for a career, is there a way to separate the UIC students who are interested in that?
Yeah, sure. And now that you say it, yes, we should do that. No, in fact, I think what we'll do is we'll have our kids essentially fill out an interest form, a lot like what you'll do to participate in the program, and we'll make that all available. When everything gets going here in a couple of weeks, we'll also have an online forum, just a web board, a chat board, for people to, first of all, post, here's who I am and what my interests are. Again, it's a matchmaking kind of process. And to have interactions on, well, you know, are you really interested in that, specifically this thing, and you can go back and forth with people to form teams. And I want to really stress, it's going to be up to students on both sides to form those teams. All we aim to do here is provide the forum to interact and the opportunity to form those teams. But we want you folks to find each other, and we'll provide opportunities for that interaction.
You know, one thing I would say is, you know, there's going to be kind of a lot of gray areas with these sort of issues. Partnerships, those are really tricky, even when people know each other well. But, you know, you have to look at what's the alternative. You know, the alternative, like from a booth perspective, would be having, you know, $100,000 to spend on hiring someone to do something, and that's probably not practical. So there's going to be some trade-offs in terms of you know, the relationship and really what your alternatives are. And so the alternatives are people sort of volunteering to work on these things, and they're going to have to figure these things out and kind of make their way through the abyss, and hopefully something good will come out of that. But it is a tricky kind of scenario, I think.
At Booth, we often joke that this is dating. You know, you can have.
Yeah.
That's right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wondered if we shouldn't have just hired one of the dating service companies to put together the forum for us, because it's the same process. Yeah.
Yeah, we find one of the best ways to approach things is to set short-term goals and work together to achieve that near-term goal and see how it goes. And then that's the next step from there. And that's something that we're happy to review with our students, to review with the teams as they go along, because it's not easy to understand what the milestones should be.
And that's overwhelming to think of the big picture, right? So I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I'd also say that, you know, there are these two classes in play. And I think a really neat model would be you know, find yourself a partner or partners this fall in our new class, and you all move together into the spring into the full-blown senior capstone class and build and prototype and all of this. That'd be great. But it's also entirely possible that you partner up this fall with someone, you do some good work together, but you part ways at the end of the semester, either because that student is graduating or moving on, or something doesn't work, or something, it's just time to move on. You could form a new team in the fall, sorry, a new team in the spring, in the senior projects class, to take that to the next step. So when Megan talks about short-term goals, you know, when you have short-term goals, you also have to have short-term exit ramps and short-term on-ramps to new things and new ideas. And so that's certainly an option here.
Great. So I've gotten a few questions from Chime over chat. So his first question is, how big would the class be? I'm assuming that's for the fall, but perhaps you could tell us about the class size for the fall, as well as the class time for the size for the spring.
Sure. So right now, there are 24 students in the new class, in the new experimental class. And obviously I know there's a lot more interest in that on the Booth side that's been expressed. So the other thing I haven't really talked about much yet is that this is a match process. Even if you come and say, I'm interested and I want to participate, there's no guarantee that you match up this time. And in some sense, that's a good thing, because we want the matches that work to really work and be optimal. And so not everybody's going to find that right combination. For those who are interested, there's also the senior capstone class, the fall version of which is going on right now, and they have 120 kids signed up in that class right now. So for people who, and because of the timing of the quarters versus semesters, you know, our fall kids have already picked their projects and they're about to go into design review in the next 2 weeks. But there's certainly an opportunity for people who are interested in interacting with established groups to essentially join the teams that are in the senior capstone class right now in the fall. In the spring, we're expecting a total load in the spring of something like 160 to 180 students in the senior capstone course. And so there again, if you have an idea you want to bring forward, and you don't get a good match this fall, and you want to stick with it, I'm very happy to have you come bring that into the spring senior capstone course. The only downside there is you have to be ready to present that idea in January, and I love it. I love the mayhem of it in the spring, but things launch hard and fast, and it's 3 months of total madness and hard work and emergencies and breakthroughs and inspiration and desperation and perspiration, and it's a blast. So if you don't match up this fall, and you want to stick with it, come to us in the spring. There'll be a lot more kids available, and we're hoping, since this is a pilot class, that class size is going to grow over the next couple of years. So for those of you who are second year already, that probably doesn't matter, but for those of you who are first year, keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Another question we have is, would Booth students need to have any specific background to attend the class? From where we're sitting, I would think that answer is no, just an enthusiasm and interest in doing this, but I can let you answer that as well.
Yeah, no, in fact, in some sense, I say that our students don't have to have any particular background. I've had quite a few students from outside of my department come and take the class. And because we form teams, there's no requirement that you must bring a certain skill set. The requirement is that you must bring a skill set. And so whatever that is, bring something to the table and find the right match, and then contribute, and it'll all work out.
Is there a time that a time commitment the undergrads are expected to have, or is it kind of the same message that you've given the Booth students, that you have a guide?
It's a little more well set on our side because the kids are taking classes, and so like I said, in the spring, we tell them to expect to spend at least 15 hours a week in the lab, and that's averaged over the semester. And there are weeks when it's a lot more, and there are weeks when hopefully everything's come together and you get to breathe a little easier. This class in the fall is a much lower credit hour class, and the expectations are a little lower. The expectations in the fall are sort of in the 5 to 10 hour range.
Jimmy has also asked, is there a plan to ensure that teams can meet on a frequent basis? And my initial answer to that would be that Jason and I will work to have a few initial ways to meet the students, and we'll work with Scott and with Brian and Andy to arrange that. How you initially start this pilot program and potentially meet up with a team. But beyond that, that will be the beauty of this pilot program, is that you're working with a team, and this experience is what you make it. And you'll be the one working to set up times for conversations, whether online or over the phone or in person with your team. So that, again, is really up to you and the type of commitment and level of participation you want to have in this program. Would you add anything else to that, Scott?
Just that, again, from our side, both the new class and the established class, they're classes. And so and this is one of the things that makes our high degree of flexibility for mentors work. We have TAs who kind of keep track of where the students are in the schedule that they've defined and make sure that the students are sticking with it. And so TAs, once students have a project, TAs meet with student groups at least once a week. And that might be a time, and that time is set by everyone, doodle polling or whatever, and agreeing on a time. That could be a time that would also include the Booth students, that, okay, we definitely meet at least once a week at this time, and then also as necessary. And so there's, again, like a lot of things with the class, there's some built-in structure. You're welcome to modify that structure.
Great. I think David has one more question he'd like to ask here.
Yeah. Can you guys just clarify the timeline? So when does the class start and when does it end? And then just what day of the week does it meet and at what time?
Sure. So the new class, the class that we're teaching right now, started August 21st. And it will run 15 weeks. It ends in early December. We have a week-long break around the Thanksgiving holiday. Um, in a couple of weeks, we'll start some brainstorming. We're going to set up the chat room. When you guys, it's not really a chat room. It's a. I'm old and I don't know, the difference between various things on the internet. But there's some place where you can type and other people will type back. We'll set that up. You'll be invited to participate in that. That happens in a couple of weeks. And then we'd really like to get through 2 cycles of brainstorming the solutions to the problem that's picked up, proposing a design, having it peer-reviewed with us and, well, with peers, and then tear it all down and start over and do it again. And so that pretty much takes us into the beginning of December, and that's the end of things for this semester.
And which day of the week is the class?
Oh, sorry, the class meets Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 5. But these, for instance, the peer reviews and things like that, we will schedule outside of normal class hours.
Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, and just quick clarification. So what have the students been working on up to this point?
Yeah, so up to this point, they've been reading and essentially doing small homework assignments on in learning the design process, learning how to analyze ideas, where to find ideas, how to work up requirements and verification tables, how to do tolerance. We're working soon on how to do tolerance analysis. The sorts of things that they're kind of expected to know from birth, but we never really teach them when we're teaching them how a transistor works. And so that's what they've been doing so far, and we've begun looking at old projects from the senior design course. So we're spending some time in retrospect analyzing those older projects to see what worked and what didn't, what drove success, and what eventually led to failure.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Yeah, one of the things I'll just comment briefly on, when you talk about skill sets, most of the engineering kids are, I won't say they're petrified to interact with the outside world, but they're not very good at it. They're young, they tend to be stereotypical engineers where they're kind of introverted. So you should anticipate that. And I think one of the things that the MBA students can bring, and I know they're not introverted, this is not their problem. So I think there can be a really good team that's built there where your skill sets really complement maybe what our kids lack and what I've seen them struggle with in the past. Because so as an MBA, just being able to go out there and do some market research and talk to people and get feedback, well, you can't imagine how valuable that would be to these young engineers.
We had feedback from a booth student who participated in this program last year who said that he also really enjoyed the fact that he could just coach the students in general on the things that he felt like he knew a little better because he was a few years ahead of them. He'd already graduated and worked, and he gave them presentation tips and, just ideas for how they could improve their performance in their class in general. So the experience can definitely be focused more in the technology or startup, or, it sounds like there are opportunities to just have an impact in the way they perform in the class in general. So I think there are a lot of ways to be involved.
And Scott, maybe you can talk about one really outstanding project in the past, couple of years of the senior capstone course that might provide some context for the people watching.
Sure. Actually, I'll talk a little about a project that Brian and I were going over in class yesterday. It was from the spring. It was a really neat project, and actually, since there was a question about a single UIUC student joining, this was a project done by a single student. He was an exchange student from Comillas University in Madrid, and he was a climber. And he proposed...
Like all Spaniards.
Like all Spaniards. I spent a lot of time in Spain, and all of my Spanish friends climb. So the statistical result is that all Spanish people climb. So he's a climber, and he came in with an idea that he wanted to have a series of holes on a gym climbing wall that would light up to indicate a route up the wall would have a sensor that would allow the hold to know when it was being held, and the holds would all feed that information back to a brain that could record routes or indicate routes or allow for modification of a route as you go along. And this is something that's done in climbing gyms, if you don't climb and you don't know, with little bits of tape right now, and it doesn't always work very well, and it leads to a mess in a busy gym. So this is a really neat idea that he brought the basic problem of routing and programming a climbing route on the wall in the gym to the class, and then he solved that problem. He had a fantastic set of documents for the design review with a very complete set of plans with simulations of the circuits, with the printed circuit boards all already designed and ready to be built. And then he went out and built the thing and built prototypes. He used a facility on campus to do a 3D print of the holds with a hollow background to hold all the lighting and sensor electronics. And then he built a small prototype. And it worked beautifully. And he is now back in Spain, whereas in most of Europe, if you want to work as an engineer and you want to put the title of engineer after your name, you have to finish sort of what in the U.S. we'd consider the equivalent of a master's program, and he's back doing that now. It's almost a shame, because I think that had a tremendous amount of market potential, and with the right team, I think one of the things that could come out of these teams is that even if some members of the team are going to move on with their lives in other directions, there may be some core group that takes some of these ideas and pushes it out of the classroom. So that's a spectacular project. I loved it. There have been numerous others that have been remarkable, either for the level of ambition or the level of innovation, or in some cases, since we are teaching a class, I'm also very happy to see things where students simply develop professionally. And as Brian said, a lot of kids come in and there are certain perhaps stereotypical social deficits or skills or behaviors that you might associate with engineers, and our kids learn to work in teams, to deal with customers, to give professional presentations, and to become working engineers. And so sometimes that's the best outcome we could possibly ask for, and I'm very happy to see that as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for those explanations. I think that we've really answered a lot of this opportunity, so thank you so much. And thank you to David and Chime for joining us today. For the Booth students listening, again, your next step is to fill out our Google form with your interest in this program and submit that by this Sunday. Please feel free to email me or Jason if you have questions. You should have our email addresses by now. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think we'll be available for questions if they should arise. But our expectation is that we've addressed most of the major ones in the video and through the form, and we're just excited to see who applies and how we can help support you as we start building teams.
Absolutely, and we appreciate your interest in this and understand, it is a pilot program, and we're working to build this and improve it along the way, and we're excited to work with people who understand that the point of this is collaboration, that this is an incredible opportunity, but it's something that has to be worked at, and we appreciate your efforts and your interest in it. So thank you so much, and thank you again to Scott and to Brian. We are very excited to work with you both this fall. So you have a great day, and again.
Thank you, Jason. We really appreciate you hosting this, and thank you to David and Chinmay. They're great questions, and I think you are excellent representatives of your peer group, so thanks for participating.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, for watching today, and we hope everyone has an excellent day. Goodbye from the Polsky Center.